Hello, Mike. Happy Thursday.
Jack, happy Thursday to you as well. And I guess we're in the throes of summertime, Chicago, which is raining and cold. I don't know. Whatever happened to all those sultry long days
Mm.
where we had to turn on air conditioning. I certainly recall as a youth that we never had any air conditioning at our old place because,
Mm. Yeah.
it never got hot, but I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I had my first strawberries from the backyard garden,
Mm.
so yeah, definitely feels like summer.
Well, that's cool. I have a very aggressive strawberry patch as well. I didn't realize it's
Mm.
kind of a weed, but it never seems to make any, or else the there's a rabbit back there that is very mean, and I think
Mm.
guards the patch pretty carefully in order to eat them all. So I don't know.
Mm.
Maybe that's the trick. Yeah, I was just talking about academia,
Mm.
and there was a funny you sent a really good article a couple weeks back, and I did like it. But in the beginning of the article, see if this sounds familiar, because maybe
Mm.
this first rant that we'll have won't be about AI, but about academia and about like how is it that you make people understand or deflect people from the idea that you are or are not an expert in or have something useful to say, right? Is that maybe how it works? So there's two quotes in the beginning of this article, and one is teamwork allows people with different expertise to collaborate effectively. And it is followed by three references: Kogut and Zander from 1992, Argote from 1999, and Nickerson and Zenger from 2004. And then the
Mm.
next statement is people enjoy connecting with other people, which increases their motivation to work, which is referenced by Deutsch in 1949, Kolowski and Bell in 2013, and Johnson and Johnson in 2005. Should be in numeric
Mm.
order. So I quote those as being the most ridiculous thing that I've ever seen. As
Mm.
in, is how can you make fairly un controversial statements and yet have to back them up with some ridiculous research that then would you have to go read these papers in order to believe? And like, is that academia to just continually go down rabbit holes until you get tenure? I don't know. Maybe that's how it works.
Oh yeah, I mean there's so much that I can tell from experience about this subject matter that I mean maybe I will start safely, right? The safe thing maybe to talk about would be kind of like less controversial would be there's always this discussion about who should teach the introductory courses, right? Should this be TAs because the material is the easiest,
Mm-hmm.
or should it be the professors with the most experience because this is the beginning of the learning process and you really need to get introduction or a material kind of laid out in a way that kind of resonates with people, right? So that's kind of like, hey, uh, what do you do, right? And it's not even kind of like, hey, and maybe the professor should have industry experience, right? Like real world applications uh,
Ouch.
of
Yeah.
the knowledge, right? Like, hey, maybe that's the key.
It's
And
very,
then
very tenure non-adjacent there.
yeah, exactly. And then on the other hand, when I was in kind of various research groups, sometimes there was a discussion. So how do we call ourselves? And somebody would say, hey, maybe we will call ourselves like an applied, I don't know, machine learning group. And then there would be like professors saying, well, but let's not make it applied because applied suggests that we are not good, right? Quote unquote. Okay. So, so you see, I mean, there's so many things that we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
that we can put on the subject, but I think it is would be safe to assume that real world experience is maybe slightly different from academic experience.
Sure, sure.
Real, so maybe there's maybe something to say about, hey, maybe the academia is kind of the ivory tower, not exactly transferable to the real world, and therefore there should be probably some consequences to that statement.
Well, it doesn't necessarily jive, but we were just having a sort of, I wouldn't call it an argument, but sort of a meta, we were just very upset by some events, and it all has to do with being an artist. And I started to kind of bemoan the fact that, at least in this country, right, being an artist has to be done for free and is inherently worthless. Until somebody says otherwise, right? Like somehow it's always like optional to consider any sort of creative or visual work or whatever to be valuable, right? It's just the baseline is it's not worth anything. And I'm curious if maybe we have a similar feeling about academia. Like if your work is inherently worthless, then it's great to have academia to fund you and back you up or whatever. It gives you a day job, right? So you could do maybe work that is, well, let's not call it worthless, but I'm trying to understand in my own thought processes about how long things take. Like, let's just say it took you 20 years. I think I just published my Tycho Brahe thing, right? Like, took him 20 years of observation to get the data that later led to something, but there was no guarantee. Like this was just data, right? This was just and not great data. We didn't have telescopes, but it was pretty good, and it was very, it was thorough. Let's call it that. And he got tons of money to build his pleasure palace and everything in order to do this work by the the Danish government liked him, and he was also rich, so that also helped. So it's like, you were a tech bro, right? You got given tons of cash to have the time to do something really, really difficult, but there was no thought to how you would use it later. And that's where Kepler comes in, and he has to kind of rescue the whole thing. But even he's a nut, so it's this weird like thing about both of them, not necessarily academics, but I don't know. That was a lot there. Art worthless. Things take time. I don't know. Can you unpack that into anything reasonable for our listeners? Because I think I just.
Oh yeah. So totally. So maybe let's kind of start smaller, like basic research, for example. Is basic research necessary? Absolutely, it is. Right. I mean, we probably know that. But the very point of basic research is that you are studying something that may not absolutely have any applications in your lifetime, or maybe ever, right? Like maybe the prime number kind of like theorems that are out there, maybe they will kind of become essential only for the quantum field theoretic, kind of research that will be kind of out there maybe in 50 years or who knows. So that is. So totally, we can say the same thing about academia, although, there is this component where, okay, academia may be very useful today in preparing people students for real world jobs, right? But also part of the academia is research, right? And you often don't know whether, what you're studying is significant and important today, right? Maybe never will be, but I think there is an author that says that science is this like a crazy tailor. It builds clothes for beings that maybe not existing yet, but maybe they will fit for some other beings that are kind of not exactly fitting, but will benefit from having those clothes there. So it's kind of like that, and I think that we are, so yeah. I mean, look how many great artists were kind of like appreciated after their death, right? And how many great musicians today?
For a while, all of them, probably.
Yeah.
Unless the church was involved. So, we'll give the church something, right?
Exactly. But you can also make an argument that, like, what kind of schools they went to. Nobody knows what kind of school Vincent van Gogh finished, or or Kepler, or whatever, or maybe you have a guitarist like maybe a great flamenco guitarist or heavy metal guitarist. They probably never went to any school. They just learned this thing through applying themselves.
Django Reinhardt only had like 2 fingers, right? So he even was had to invent his own way of playing.
Yeah. So Yeah, so I think that Jimi Hendrix is a great example, right, of what we are talking about, right? Like he didn't know even which way the guitar should be held, probably. So he had his guitar completely upside down and on the left side, and
Yes.
still is considered to be like the greatest guitar player ever, by
Well,
many.
well, I think you caught on, well, at least a slight thematic thing that what we can put into AI, which is there's a new show called the Rehearsal. And it's a wonderful show, which I'm not going to spoil. But one of the really interesting things about the concept of the rehearsal, which is I guess a comedy show, but it isn't really, is that people, or at least the person creating this show, creates a artificial world so people can practice challenging situations, right? So he basically kind of lets us act in a environment so that we can make mistakes and not feel so terrible as we would if we were in the real world. And it's a
Mm.
very kind of fun, profound show, actually, very much so in this latest one, because I think that pretending part is really interesting because we don't learn, let's go back to academia, right? I'm trying to
Mm.
put together this talk that we were talking about last week, and it's like the the bemoaning that people don't read anymore is kind of a thing now, but it's like reading is the least effective way of getting across ideas, right? It's just it's a wonderful use of your time, I think,
Yeah, it's a
but
low
it
low
isn't.
bandwidth, right?
Yeah, it's not effective whatsoever.
Mm.
What is effective is acting things out, right? And they kind of were making this point, like if you experience something, even if it's fake, it's more impactful than it would be that if it was something just internal dialogue, right? Which might also be similar to some effects I've had around using AI, right? It's like it's not real. It's not teaching me anything. It feels like a dialogue.
Mm.
It refers to itself as I and you. It pretends to have this, but then when someone else shares their experience with the very same engine, right? It's like it talks very differently to them and about different things. It's a very different experience. Like you said, the tailoring may
Mm.
come into play in this metaphor, but the thing is neither is real, right? Neither is the same as having a discussion with you. Thanks for your always for your time, right? or
Mm.
or or in any other situation. Now I'm going to give a lecture which is also very artificial, like TED Talky. I'm going to say
Mm.
something so cool that somebody will remember it, I guess. That's my
Mm.
hope. you know or one of the dozens of things I guess I get to say over a certain amount of time, right? So
Mm.
I'm interested in this only because we're at this deflection point somewhat that we can artificially create experiences, tailored
Mm.
experiences very cheaply. I guess that's really always the point, right? It's not expensive. It's not hard to get, right?
Mm.
You just need any device, and now you can have a dialogue about anything. And my wife and her sister have been going on back and forth about medical stuff. And I started to
Mm.
read this thing now that 4.0 at least, when compared to a study, an academic study, let's put it back there, of
Yep.
how people diagnose different kinds of illnesses, that people are doctors, then doctors with different AI tools, all of which score nowhere near as well as just 4.0 on its own, which apparently is like 90 percentile right now
Mm.
in terms of being able to take anything and give proper diagnosis.
Mm.
Um, again, my conclusion is that as humans we need experiences, right? We don't need, or maybe we do need AI to be the doctor, but we still have to do all the work, I guess is my point. Like I think it just pushes up the bar to the area where people feel less comfortable, which is okay, now you need to act, now you need to exercise, now you need to change your diet, etc. You see what I mean? Like
Mm.
the taking the interpretation out of it, and the sales and the drug companies, and you see what I mean? Like all of the noise out of the system only puts more problems onto the person themselves, whereas the person can deflect, right? Like I have to take all these medicines, which is true. Sorry,
Mm,
family. But, I'm taking all these medicines for all these ailments and I'm not getting better,
mm,
right? And GPT is there to say, oh, yeah, you just need to do, eat this and do this. You see what I mean? Or something probably not that radical, but yet it is radical because it's not part of this industry. So maybe we can just say right now, sorry, wherever I'm going with this thematically is, does the industry support itself for the common good or for just to be there for the long haul, right? Like, it's nice to have an institution that, hey, we're going to be here for another 100 years, right? Do we need to change instantly to deal with things like AI? No, we don't. We just need to continue to exist. Or the medical industry, do we just need to keep the status quo going, or do we have to change? And I guess that's an individual thing. Boy, that was a lot. Okay, there you go. There's the whole metaphysical problem in a
so
nutshell.
so if we think about where the AI plays a role, right? I mean, it could have a very positive role, right? It
Yes.
can give you the recipe, what needs to be done, and but you will have to act on it. Now,
Yes.
however, the new, let's say, the text to video models for Google, right? Extremely believable, fantastic result. Even the first generation of it. Probably it's not
Yeah.
first generation,
Oh,
but it's
100%.
kind of like as a so what it produces is kind of breathtaking. So it may be kind of like provide an enormously wide bandwidth that will kind of like distract us from acting on the things that we are supposed to do. Because if you have your diagnosis and the
Oh,
diagnosis says, hey, you need to go for an hour of a bike ride, and then you have to take a walk, and then let's do 20 push-ups, right? But then you will have that AI system that can, and it's much more than just sitting on the couch and watching a sitcom that you kind of like, but you are not really kind of crazy about it. But now you're going to be able to kind of say whatever you want to the AI and produce whatever high bandwidth experience that you want. Then it's going to be much harder to get off the couch, because it's going to be, now you're going to be in any world that you want to be, while still, so are we just waiting for the, silver bullet genetic research that will kind of give us the pill that will make us, fit and healthy, while not distracting us from watching the breathtaking worlds that AI will create? I don't know, but this is going to be probably a little bit harder for a while for us.
yeah. I mean, as often as it's been theorized, I, I, I guess the problem would be it's the Ready Player Oneing of the world, right? There's
Mm.
always been the
Yeah.
we're all just going to plug into some universe where anything happens, and weirdly enough, they all get kind of rejected. This is what's happening. Like even hardcore gamers find themselves not being particularly entertained by these things anymore. And all I can say is Facebook, I guess, came out with the master plan, right? Is that if we have this great graph on you, we should be able to tailor a experience for you. Just have the advertisers pay us, and then we'll generate it for you. And I'm like,
Mm.
sure. I mean, I've been in commercials for a while, but problem with that is that often these are shared experiences, right? People go to places to share an experience with others because that's
Mm.
what's valid, right? Is not you yourself getting your own personal tutor, more that you're in a group of people in a class and half the class is struggling, right? I mean, that's probably the best part of school anyway, which is to say stuff like, God, could you believe Professor Dinkus today? Who can believe he has tenure? He can't even describe, I couldn't understand a word he said or whatever. We both know who that professor is, Harvard educated
Mm.
guy who nobody could stand having in class because, whatever, it wasn't that he wasn't smart or capable. It was that you have to, well, there's more to it, I guess. What do you think, right? Like, I don't think we're that simple.
But you can event in a multiplayer game now. I think the multiplayer games actually address the very thing that you are trying to say right now. That hey, we don't have to really be in the same room. We don't have to drink this, sit at the same table. We're just gonna create something that will kind of gonna get us together, but it's gonna be a virtual meeting, right?
Oh, right.
And
Okay. Yeah.
so
But
yeah,
that
so
still
I
has shared goals and shared understanding of the world you're in, or something or other, right? Like you were saying, oh, well, that's really weird that that creature acts through the
yeah.
vomit cannon at you. Wow, that was great that you dodged it. You see what I mean? You still
Yeah.
need like variety, right? Or else, and not necessarily like scalable variety. You need unusual things to happen. Dungeons and Dragons style, right? Which didn't
Yeah.
have anything behind it other than somebody thinking like, well, I'm not going to just sit here and describe every rock and tree. The whole point is to engage you guys into actions or fake actions that have some sort of results. And I still think, there's room for that. Uh, I mean, I guess we can stick to the AI trend, which is programmatic targeted advertising going to change us as consumers? I'm like, no, because I don't know. I can't remember the last thing I ever noticed being advertised, right? I deliberately try to block them all out.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Right. This is just the price we pay for free stuff. I always feel like, I'm like, fine, you're not going to charge me for this wonderful content. Now, if the content, I've noticed a lot of the content itself, I don't know if it's AI generated, because you saw the whole story about some big startup that wasn't AI generated. They just had hundreds of developers do all the work and pretended it was AI generated. I'm thinking there's a little of that in my mind right now as people begin to change their business models and say, okay, we're firing all these people. I'm like, I don't think you've actually replaced anyone with AI. I think you've just shuffled the cards, to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which,
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Disney is doing that, right? I mean, I think the big chunk of the people that Disney is letting go of is going to be people who develop animations content, right? Because now, one guy is going to be 10 times more productive. So yeah, it may not be an end-to-end solution, but I just looked at something that was on LinkedIn. Somebody posted like a rendering of Antonio Gaudi's church in Barcelona, uh, and this was beautifully done. And when I was studying architecture, I was doing actually very similar rendering, and it took me several days to do it by
Oh,
hand,
you mean
pen and
like
paper,
rendering as a drawing or something, right?
as a drawing, as a portfolio piece, right? And it was, and now when I look at this, it was probably generated by some sort of a CAD system, maybe Revit with some sort of an AI input, and maybe it took 10 minutes. And so how can you address that thing? I mean, we lost the artistic struggle, right? We lost um, the kind of like the development opportunity that I had, by practicing my hand to kind of build something artistic. Right? But what we gained, well, maybe we gained, a capability to generate like 20 different views of the same building, in a few minutes. So for an engineer, maybe it's a huge benefit, because it would be impossibly difficult and expensive to develop something like that by hand. So how do you address all this? I mean, I'm not sure, but this, whatever is happening, is quite revolutionary, and it kind of is touching academia, right? Because in the academic world, if you want to be an architect, for example, you will have those studio classes, and you're just doing that, just rendering by hand, pen and paper, pencil, whatever the media would be, to develop that skill. But now that skill that is the foundation of being an architect, or as programmer, you no longer have to program, because you have AI to do that. Those foundational skills, you don't practice them anymore, right? So does it mean that you're going to be a better architect? Or does it mean that you're going to be a better programmer? Or is that totally a moot point nowadays? I mean, maybe we don't need programmers and architects, because rendering, drawing by hand or programming by hand is a craft that is no longer necessary, and there is no ROI on it. And where does it leave us, right? I mean, that maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I mean, it's easy to say that, hey, the artistic process, having it is a good thing, right? Playing an instrument is a good thing, and becoming a master at it, we said, maybe there's a genius like Jimi Hendrix, and maybe he just played, a few hours, in his life and become like that. But the majority of us need, the 10,000 hour rule, right? You need 10,000 hours of training to become a master. Right. So maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but there is a revolutionary process that is happening right now.
Well, I think it could do a couple of things. I mean, psychologically, it could discourage people, which is a shame, right? Because it's really not the 10,000 hours equals mastery. I get that thought. I think it's more 10,000 hours proves to you that you enjoy doing this. And what else do you have other than time, right? Like,
But the neuroplasticity of human brain probably kind of gets you close to being really good, right?
Yeah. But I'm still saying, like, you don't have to, like, I spent probably 10,000 hours listening to music, but it doesn't help anybody except me, because I can just now listen to more music. That's all. And when someone else comes in, they always say, can you turn that music off? And I was like, God, I can't imagine my world without music playing sometimes, right? It's just that thing. But 100%, not only 100, probably more than 10,000 hours, but also hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase and to all that stuff, right? So I'm just saying that investment in time to me is not at all ever a waste if it doesn't provide me with income later, because I'm like, that's also kind of a construct. So speaking of academia, if you sat and had a well-paying job and you could think about something that was going to take you 10 years to really understand well, fine, right? Like, that's the kind of jobs I think that are great jobs. I was thinking about our good friend Einstein, once had the boring desk job, right? He just, was paid fairly well to do something probably that wasn't very strenuous, whatever patent clerks do, review article or whatever, I'm sure it was not taxing, right? But it gave him time either at work or whatever, right? He got time to think about his funny thought experiments or whatever he was, because he's sitting there reading Maxwell and trying to figure out, like, this is so strange, what is, whatever, because or not, many don't know, he was not a mathematician, he wasn't really like particularly gifted. But having time and income, I think, is where people tend to go with AI, right? And I'm like, well, it might not equate to income because we're weird that way, right? Because we like performative effort. We like to see people catch balls and make touchdowns and stuff, like something that's very obvious that takes a lot of effort, we're willing to pay a lot for. And things that don't look like obvious effort, like maybe whatever Sam Altman or Elon Musk does, like, their obvious effort doesn't seem to be making things, but just talking or something, right? I mean, Steve Jobs was good at this too. I don't think Steve Jobs ever invented anything, right? He was just good at talking and getting other people to do it. And then, that's fine. As I said, I'm not pointing out that they're good or bad, but their jobs aren't to do anything, in many ways, right? But they're very well compensated. Let's put it that way. They're very well compensated for just that job of not making anything. So when you say productivity's up at Disney, that's where I get a little mad, right? Because, like, it really shouldn't be your job as an animator to get a lot of animation done. It should be your job as an animator to communicate some sort of and something, that connects with people, right? That I was an animator once, by the way. Fun fact, speaking of 10,000 hours, it's really hard. But I worked with a guy who worked at Disney, and he showed me, like, here's my Mickey Mouse drawings where it was Mickey jumping on a bunch of jello or something. And I was like, to me, this was just pure magic, which it was, right? Like, you just had a job where you had to think of, like, well, how do I get somebody watching to engage? And I kind of keep going there because I'm like, the job of the actual drawing part isn't the part of Sagrada Familia, right? That the drawing part, in fact, I think Gaudi liked drawings, because remember, he did all those curves. He tried to figure out how to do the catenary curves so that you can have the structure be funny looking. And I think he just built models, because I don't, yeah, there's many architects like Geary, like, I just want to see the thing, right? And then here you go, make it into a million drawings, and then figure out how the CNC will cut all the, all that hard stuff. I don't want to do, right? I just want to be this visionary. And then most people are like, can't afford to hire him anyway, because I'm just going to get the plan from Sears Roebuck, where they've already built everything and all we have to do is assemble it. See, so there's like opposite minds about what the value is in a profession. And I hate to think that the rarefied people are going to screw things over for the people who need to put in the time, right? Like, if you
Yeah,
don't get
yeah.
to put in the time in being an animator of thinking and whatever, remember the old ball it up and throw it in the garbage thing? Do people even do that anymore?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what the job is, right? Is to edit. Let's just say at a certain point, your job is to edit and refine rather than produce.
Yeah, well, maybe the AI is going to enable all this. Right now, and the job, the purpose of a corporation is not to support an artistic, vision of their employees, is to make money, right? So there is, so they need to be paid their salaries, and they need to get their, health insurance, and the stockholders have to be happy with the direction of the company and with the price of the equities. So, so there is, this is incongruent, right? Like, hey, but maybe the AI kind of like getting into those places where the money gets created and the value gets created is going to kind of like take over the hard part, and then us, being creative, we will have time to actually do it the way you are describing it, which I think is the right way, because but the fact remains that in a lot of cases over the course of history, the greatest creators were actually hungry, right? They didn't have any means to survive, and maybe we are a little bit more comfortable today, but still the same problem remains. Disney is firing people because of the balance sheet calculation, not because of their any other vision, certainly not artistic.
Well, I think that there's a couple of things that are probably, and I don't disagree at all. I think there's this feeling too that a lot of this is um the way it isn't the way it should be, it's just the way it is, right? That actually corporations in some ways should just benefit the people that work at the corporation. But now the idea of having a rising stock price and the Jack Welches of the world that kind of ruined it for everybody, that said, no, we must grow constantly. Because I'm thinking of, there really, if there should be, kind of like government work, you should just be able to work at Apple for the next 50 years, and you don't have to do a whole lot, but there's plenty of money to go around. And you see what I mean? And you as a company don't need to make any money. You just have to support your efforts, right? You don't have to have 23% profit in order to be worthwhile, right? Every year over year. See, that's the thing that I think, we've we've commodified it certainly when it comes to computers, because it's one of my big points is like, as far as I know, humans do not max out or double or do anything. Like I think we max out at around maybe 80% if we're lucky of our abilities that we can keep going at any particular time. Like we're pretty weak and fallible, right? And we need a lot of downtime, which is my other plus, right? Like a lot of downtime is great for humans because then we can be really, really effective if we have enough uh, time. And that maybe that's why I love going to school, right? Because then you can be like, well, I don't have to put in all of my efforts toward everything, right? I have a bunch of subjects, I have a bunch of friends, I got a bunch of whatevers. I don't remember ever being too stressed out, except maybe it's midterms now, and maybe that's when, or sorry, it's end of the school year, finals are due. You know, only a few times when you really felt like you had to deal with that. So as I said, I think a lot of this is just a construct, right? A capitalistic construct that profit is that important and people aren't. And certainly that's a big theme within AI as well, is that, you know, the replacement theory or the UBI demands or something like that. And I'm like, I don't see any issues with that, except you can't let corporations off the hook. Because certainly I don't think at this point AI is being used at all strategically. Do you agree?
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
way too early to call anything like done. You know, it's super, super early. It just so happens that computers and AI especially double every year, and we don't ever double, ever. You know, like, you know, we're stuck in this rut with this weird technology that keeps getting better and better. And I think that I don't know. I don't know that we studied that in computer science school, did we? That's why I'm like, I don't think Zuckerberg really thinks that much about putting advertisers out of business, does he? Hey, used to be people go to school for that. I used to work in you know, Leo Burnett, one of the greatest advertising firms in the world, Tony Tiger, and the mayhem guy from from Allstate, and all those, you know, all that stuff is inventions that we invented to sell a product, right? To humanize something that was inhuman. And quick, I don't know if you remember the Law and Order guy. I think his name is Basert. Anyway, we had two spokespeople for Allstate, right? One was the mayhem guy, you know, whatever his name is, and the other was base. And the problem was, is whenever something terrible happened in the world, which used to happen, still happens all the time, they would switch over because he was the calm and steady guy that just said, yes, you know, in order to deal with bad things, come to Allstate. Where the other one was like, oh, people are crazy. You need Allstate. I don't know. This is how advertising works, is that you kind of have to suit the mood of the time with your pitch. And I'm just going to say, good luck, AI. It's actually a lot harder than you think.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's yeah, I agree. I mean, the academic kind of applications of AI and the whole situation, you know, I mean, setting aside the fact that most of the academic institutions are actually run as corporations, right? Like the balance sheet is actually everything. uh, there is a certain level of comfort and privilege that kind of gives you the freedom, right? The academic freedom, but not many places, actually, not many situations in the academic world kind of give you that, right? You have to be a very well-known professor that has that kind of like the ability to choose the topic of the research, right? You kind of get access to resources kind of pretty much at will. But the majority of work in computer science, you know, there's this joke that the majority of the code is written by interns, you know, during the summertime, right? And then, you know, the majority of research is, you know, in the academia is kind of, and maybe teaching and grading is done by those, you know, untenured people who are kind of aspiring to kind of get their, for the privilege to stay at the university, you know, environment. And that is This system worked for a number of years, but it's kind of brutal, a brutal system, and now it's probably radically about to change into something new. I don't know what this is going to be, but it's going to be something new.
Well, and I think for one, and I'll give another shout out, having been part of that educational system, is the humanities. I'm thinking if you're tenured and you're in the humanities, good for you, because there is no other way to do anything that is so not part of what you said, the real world. What was it again? Like, you know what,
Yeah.
you can't have real world experience in the humanities, probably not, right? Like, it is about studying things, and all of education used to be liberal arts education for good reason, because you would never learn this stuff in the real world. And the jobs were supposed to teach you how to do the job, which is reasonable too, because why would you go into a field knowing how to do it? I mean, I don't know how many places I've been. I always have to learn their systems, you know, and I've worked in half a dozen different industries, and you just learn how they do stuff. It's not hard. It's not easy, but I couldn't have ever learned it in school, right? I couldn't ever come in and say, honestly, I designed a whole actuarial system to deal with pension fund whatever. So you know what I mean? Like, I had to learn how that worked. I couldn't go to school for that, you know, and so whatever. It's good, but I have a liberal arts education, which taught me in a sense how to, I don't know. What does it teach you? It teaches you just kind of like life, I guess, right? Like, it teaches you how different thought processes are handled, and big thinkers and small thinkers and things like that, right? You know, and
Yeah.
and if you learn physics or math, it's the same, right? You're just learning, like, hey, someone came up with these principles. They're not useful at all. Well, let's go there for a second, because I kept thinking, like, well, with AI, you could learn problems where you'd have to learn math. So in my own exploration, trying to figure out this side thing of trying to understand the universe that I've been trying to do lately. But I literally had to invent some math to understand some things. And the reason that made it fun is that then I found out someone already invented the math. But now
Yeah.
I'm like, and then your math is better than me. I just invented it because I needed it, right? I needed it for this thing I'm thinking about. But you invented it for real, and good for you. And you're 200 years old. So somebody thought of it way before me, but I just didn't know they existed. And same thing as I wrote this whole bit about something. Then I find this guy who wrote a book about it, and I'm reading the book. It's a great book. But this person is got their physics degree from Harvard, you know, back 20 years ago. So obviously knows something of what they're talking about. But I can understand what they're talking about because I already had to think about it. So I'm starting to
Yeah.
wonder if education could sort of stop being so about, I'm going to cram things into your head, and you're going to regurgitate those things, and then you're going to forget them immediately. Right? I mean, that's not a great system.
Maybe it's not, but I'm exactly a product of that kind of a system, right? Like, hey, you know, we're gonna put a lot of pressure on you. You're gonna memorize a lot of things. You will not get the big picture, but you will have to pass a number of exams, filters that will kind of give you a pass to the next semester. And if you don't, then maybe there's something wrong with your brain, right? I mean, maybe you are not good enough to be an engineer, right? I mean, that's actually the first thing, you know, my first degree is in engineering. And, you know, I remember my first class, you know, the professor, very well respected, older, you know, gray beard, gray hair, told us probably in the first sentence that not everybody has to be an engineer. If you don't pass this class, you will not be an engineer, and that's okay. And maybe he was right, or maybe he was totally wrong, because he did absolutely zero effort to engage us. He made zero effort to actually make the subject matter kind of like, oh, this is so cool, I would like to study it more, right? There's nothing of that. It was just pure terror, right? Hey, you know, here's the requirement. The bar is very high, and if you don't get it, then yeah, maybe you need to study something else.
Well, we both have kids that have gone through a different education system, perhaps, right? And I don't know that, in some ways, I will say personally, I feel more akin to you because the reason I went into art school and became an artist is that I met with somebody who was an artist, friend of my parents, and I showed him my work, and they're like, "You're terrible, and you should not be an artist." And so that even more what made me be like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this." And of
Yeah.
course, they were right. I'm a terrible artist, but I'm still an artist. I mean, I don't know why, right? It's just one of those things where you just sort of, I don't know. And I don't know that being encouraging or being engaging is the answer because, as I said, you have to invent the math yourself in order to understand the math,
Mm.
right? It's kind of exciting, right? Because it's a wonderful world, and hey, there's tons of stuff to discover, right? It's really amazing. The more you look, the more there is, right? It can't be beat. But as a student, if you are prescribed the fact that, hey, in order to make a living and not starve to death, this is how you do it. I kind of
Yeah.
think that's not ever been true, right? Are they always lying? Because I don't know that there is any prescriptive path to well, I mean, I was just talking to my wife about this because they said, yeah, this stuff is going on the web and it's not the right way. And I was kind of like, listen, I invented the internet. I know how all of this stuff works because I was there when it was being invented, right? Like, I mean, I remember every single thing and how to solve it because I was there. Now, if I taught it to you, what were you going to get? 5% of that? Because you just weren't there to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And as I said, I don't think that that's true. Once something is done, you don't need. I mean, I can only wonder like about what psychologists learn nowadays, that kind of thing, right? Like,
Mm.
psychology always seemed to me like something that is really a laggard, right? The human mind is very difficult, and it just takes forever to ever come up with any useful theories around it, right?
Mm.
Um, but certainly someone goes to school nowadays and they're taught something, and there must be some pedagogy because, right? How do you charge for it if there's no outcome?
Yeah,
Um,
there needs to be a syllabus, right? There needs to be some sort of an outline of what we are doing, and it has to be approved. And who knows if this is the right thing? I mean,
Listen,
yeah,
and
exactly.
to our point, have just proposed a syllabus and created a syllabus for strategic AI, or I think that's what it's called, strategies in AI, something or other. And I'm like, well, this is funny, since this thing is bare, and that's why I like it. This thing is barely invented, right? And so
Mm.
therefore, trying to see it and teach it to me is just amusing. How's that, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm assuming, like with many things, we'll figure it out together, and I'll just try to do whatever I do. Like your professor, I should just come in and say, AI is terrible. You should never use it. It's way beyond you or something. And that's what's so funny about it, right? Because that's the opposite of the way it feels. It's like, I'm
Mm.
going to bend over backwards to tell you exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And therefore, do you need it to? Well, I kind of have a thing with it now. It's like, when is AI going to say, nope, no idea? Go figure it out for yourself. You see what I mean? It sort of has to
Well,
be selective sometimes.
those are probabilistic engines, right? And there is never probability of zero of
Right.
having something relevant to the question. But the danger is that some students are now suing universities for professors using AI, and they are saying, "Hey, I'm not paying for the AI, I'm paying for the professor." So there is so many new things that we that we are not even contemplating.
Well, which is what fills me with excitement and fun, right? Like, if there isn't, I went to an artist talk this weekend, so we can thematically keep this together. And one thing he said that I completely agree with is that when you're making art, you have no idea where it's going to go. That's the prerequisite. Unlike the Sagrada Familia sketch, right? That could be artistic, but you know where it's going to go, right? It's going to vaguely represent something, that sort of thing. And so this representational stuff that AI is very good at it's not good at the other part, which is much filmmaking and commercialing, and all this other stuff is really, like I said, about conveying an idea and conveying it probably in a way that isn't strictly visual, right? It's an undercurrent, it's a theme or something like that. It's the hard part. Yeah, like I said, that's the hard part, is to convey something engagingly that is hard to describe in words. But in making art, I know 100% no idea where it'll end up, and to teach kids to be comfortable with that may be a thing, right? Like if you knew where it was going to be, it wouldn't be interesting to engage yourself with it, right? It would just be whatever by the numbers, right? Like, yeah, I just need to execute. Thus, that's why I don't like that word productivity, right? Productivity shouldn't be about output, right? Because I wrote 3 or 4 articles on this. Like, you can just game it, right? Like, I can game plenty of output. And now with AI, students can game, their term papers, which a couple of years ago, yeah, or at least a year ago, I did all my student assignments for my class using GPT. Hey, any students that might watch this, and it took me like 5 minutes to get all the reasonable output of all the assignments that I was asking for it to do, right? And it's pretty reasonable. But of course, what I realized is that I know what the output should be. That was the tricky part. Like, I know what's good and bad, right? Because obviously I'm teaching it, right? And my hope isn't necessarily that you do good or bad work, but I can help you get better at knowing what good and bad is, right? Or certainly that's true of any creative work. Like, we spend most of our time throwing things away because what's good and what's bad, right? If it's just it's there, that's never the goal, unfortunately, right? So actually, I submitted the talk. The follow up we're going to do is, I think, called something like, is AI taking over and should we stop it? I know there's this idea, should we stop it? Because I thought that was really funny. of like, the funny thing about tech, as we talked about AI and ethics and stuff, is like, it's just a tool, right? We don't ever give it any meaning beyond that. It can't have it. It's just like, hey, is it worth having a phone or not having a phone? Well, if you don't know where you are and how to get around, it's helpful to have a map. But if you don't know how to read a map, then the map is worthless, right? Like, these are just tools, but the point is your comfort level and your abilities, right? If we're giving you a map, hey, you and I both were in the computer science degree. How many degrees did we have? 16 or something? I can't remember in computer science. It seemed like a lot.
There was a ton, yeah. 2
Yeah,
pages
so
probably.
yeah, so it's like, do I say, hey, I've got a degree in my specialty, or do I say I just have a degree in computer science, or I have a master's of science degree, or what? Like an engineer, you could say, well, I have an engineering degree, but nobody knows what that means, pretty much, right? 0 people. But you can say it, and maybe they'd say, oh, well, can you help me with my um, uh, garage is leaning, and I really think I need to get it fixed. And you go, no, I'm not that kind of engineer. It's like, my father was a doctor, but he was a psychologist. So it's not like he's going to give you good advice about the cough, that you have or something. So finding these degrees that have the useful skill in the right context was never the point. It's more like, hey, there's a lot of things that we need to be kind of good at. And due to the fact that you don't have to be good at them anymore, we outsource it, right? So we don't cook our own food. We don't, you know, we don't know how to do exercise. We need like machines, which I always think is weird. Like, hey, we had to invent machines to exercise, which I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm just being a lot weird here, but you see what I mean? Like, you don't need any of these things to do the thing, but we just made it easier. So you don't have to think about it, right? You just want to do
Mm.
reps. Here's the rep machine, you
Mm.
know, or whatever. I can't do reps without the rep machine, is the funny part, right?
Mm.
But we've come to think that way, right? Like we can't get from here to there without a phone because we could get lost. Yeah, we're actually planning a trip now, and we were going to stay in one town and then stay in the next town. And I looked it up, and it's like, well, these are like 10 mile, like 5 miles away from each other. You could just walk to the other town,
Mm.
like, and we will because that's like fun. Hey, we'll just walk there. That's how people got around. You don't need all this other stuff, but people forget that, right? Because you just think like, oh, I need to have all these things taken care of, and obviously if we're educators, we got to work really hard on that one. I think the more people think that this is like some sort of path to future success, like that's not what you're selling, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the numbers kind of are saying that, right? Like graduates today have a lot more trouble finding entry-level positions than graduates of the same degree program, the same university, a couple of years ago.
Oh,
So,
2 years, really? Ouch.
mm.
Ow.
So yeah, there's definitely, a lot of truth to what you are saying. But the problem is, solution, how the solution is supposed to look like. Yeah, not everybody is going to be kind of, a wonderful plumber, right, or welder. There is going to be people who are interested in writing poetry, right, or
Yeah.
history
Oh,
book,
absolutely.
history books, and those are very valid things to do in your life, I think.
Well, and it's unfortunate that we need low-paying jobs to give you time to do those things, I guess, right? Low-paying, low-impact jobs are great.
Mm.
Um, I certainly had one at the School of Computer Science, although why did I do all that work while I was there is the strange part. But but the point is that it wasn't expected. You were just supposed to be there, and you were supposed to deal with issues as they came in, which is fine. And I've had those sort of jobs, and I find them outrageously boring. And thankfully, I was able to use that time to do something more, either
Mm.
try to learn something, or I was a painter for a long time, and because it was so dull, I just read. I'd go through about 2 to 3 novels a week, just
Mm.
because I had a lot of time, and I think fondly of it, right? Like it was something that I wouldn't normally have time to do, to read 2 or 3 books a week.
Mm.
But because I had to be there and because of what work entailed, right? Work, especially watching paint dry, it's fine, right? I mean, you're not, it literally had to dry. Come on, like I can't be more productive. That
Mm.
was the thing. And hopefully, yeah, we just God, it just sorry. I'm just thinking of the poor Disney animator now. Maybe this should be an elegy to my old animation teacher, because I'm like, it was such hard work, but it never seemed like it wasn't fun,
Yeah.
But if you're like, okay, more animation now. Here, here's a tool that will do all your in-betweening for you. I mean, it's still that, right? It's this feeling of like you need in-betweeners. There you go. There's my new one. You know what an in-betweener is?
Well, I mean, there are those in the tweener roles that are unfortunately kind of like incongruent, right? Again, like, hey, an animator will need a project manager because there is going to be a deadline, right, for the project, right? If not, then maybe you don't have the movie, out for Christmas or something like that. So yeah, I'm not sure if, but now things are changing in a way that maybe those in betweeners, those tasks in between will be the AI tasks, right? And we will have more time to be creative. I mean, I think I enjoy programming today a lot more than I enjoyed like 5 years ago, because I have those extra capabilities. My code can do more. I can do everything much quicker. I can experiment. I can have 10 versions of everything much quicker than I used to. And I still remember the effort they had to kind of put together everything purely by hand. And I'm kind of cherishing that situation now. And the AI is only gonna improve that, I think, unless everything will be just taken over by the neural computation. Right?
Well, so I agree with you, but also remember too, we already know what it should look like. That's the thing, is like we already have a pretty strong mental model of how code works, which is great. So if we didn't have, and when did we learn that? Through all the outrageously frustrating garbage that we've spent half our lives doing,
yeah.
right? Because, but I kind of wanted to make this point, and maybe I can wrap it into this discussion, which is that if you get instant feedback, you're very quick to learn, right? Isn't that the touching the hot stove thing as kids, right? Like if you get feedback from your actions or even your thoughts quickly, you will learn quicker. And I can remember specifically watching somebody who was doing some code. I think, this was back in my I hate.net days, because they were doing some code and then they had to wait for it to compile. And I just remember this, that like waiting for something to compile is kind of like watching paint dry, except it's a little faster, but still awful in every possible way. And it took, I'd say a couple of minutes, which is long enough to not learn anything. Right. Like, and then it's like, no, break at line 47. All right. And so they would keep doing this over and over and over again. And I kept thinking like, oh, you should work on the web. The web, it'll break like immediately, and then you change it immediately, and it's so much fun. And the web is just so much easier to do all this stuff because you get instant feedback, right? You don't compile. So, from then to now, it's like I have a thought. I'm like, boom, hey, AI, give me, a huge breakdown of this. And what I find is that I'm like, well, I still have to go through it all, right? I still have to kind of, what I mean? It makes one thing quicker, but I'm not quicker. Does that make sense? Like, and I don't know that I would call it productivity other than I call it feedback, right? It's feedback on an idea that it's harder to get. And honestly, if you ever saw the way I don't do a lot of coding, but probably you do the same. It's like I give it the hardest known question. Like I'm just really good at making extremely difficult questions to answer. And so half of me is just like, go ahead, try this one. You're so smart, GPT, And it usually does a fairly good job. I mean, I'm always happy with it, but to me, it's formulating the question is the fun part. Because if you just said, here's Moby Dick, write a paper, it's going to be fine. But if you don't have anything you want it to solve, and really like, well, how do I tie Moby Dick in with Rick and Morty? See, to me, that's a really interesting question that I would love to start and see if it came up with anything interesting, and then I would build that into something more. You see what I mean? But it could do the hard part, which is, is Rick Ahab? Who is Ishmael? Is that Morty? I mean, that's to me what creativity is, right? Is that you have a dumb idea like that, but this can help you see if it's a really dumb idea, which it probably is, or whether it's just going to say like, oh my God, that's a great idea, which it says all the time, right? It's like, oh, that's so smart of you. Sorry, I guess the coding part never does this, doesn't tell you what a great coder you are. I'm sure that's the problem with engineering. It never tells you you're a good engineer. You can only fail as an engineer. That's why, right?
Yeah, actually, I don't know what does it take to be a good engineer. I have no idea, actually. It's just that
Longevity.
nebula.
Longevity. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
It also works as artists. 20-year-old artists somehow managed to make it. You know, I mean, 20 years into it, they managed to make it. So whether we like it or not, like we need longevity in our careers.
Yeah.
And AI is going to take that away from us if we're not careful.
Yeah.
All right, Jack. Grim.
All right.
We'll figure it out though, right? It's all new. We'll figure it out. It's a work in progress for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But as always, not only are you a great engineer, you are a great coder and a great professor. So see, the thing is, you've already got it all.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Mike, for a vote of confidence. You know,
100%.
I will abstain.
Well, you know, I think that's the thing is once you have it, how do you give it to others? That I think is going to be our thing. We gotta bring up the confidence of young people without the ability for them to do in-betweening, which is hard because you just kind of need boots on the ground sometimes, right? You just have to have practice. But maybe they will just forego all that and make much better films. That's our hopeful, right? Like you don't need to know how to in-between to make a great film. That's just a thing, you know, like waiting for your code to compile. It doesn't make you a better coder. You know, it just is kind of busy work that fills out the day, right? And puts your movie over budget, which is what they're always complaining about, right? But trust me, you know what they do with those films is they cut out those entire scenes anyway because they were bad. That's the problem with filmmaking. You still have to make a good film, and it doesn't have to do with what's in the film. So there's always that. Anyway, good stuff, Jack. Until next week.
Yeah, until next week. Thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks. It was good stuff.